always from the heart of the city, and now on demand 24/7 on the CHFI website. This is the soundtrack to accompany a wink, and maybe just a little nudge. And I'm Don Jackson, around the world on the internet. The definition of coincidence, a sequence of events that, although accidental, seems to have been planned or arranged. The definition of a wink, to give a signal or express a message. Both of those definitions from the American Heritage Dictionary. The author of a huge recent bestseller described a God wink as a personal signal or message directly from a higher power, usually, but not always in the form of a coincidence. Unquote. Do you believe in coincidence? Synchronicity? After this hour, you may wonder if it's a message from above. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. The Beatles and Girl, Amanda Marshall with Dark Horse, and James Blunt, and You're Beautiful. And I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. The book was on so many of the bestseller lists for quite a while, and I'm pretty sure I remember Oprah talking about it when it first came out. It was written by Squire Rushnell, called When God Winks: How the Power of Coincidence Guides Your Life, published in 2001 by Atria Books, a trademark of Simon & Schuster. In his introduction, Squire Rushnell writes, "Have you ever found yourself thinking about someone who hasn't crossed your mind in years, and then you run into that person the next day? Or has something unpleasant happened to you, like getting laid off from your job, only to find out that you had a better opportunity a short while later? Just before brushing off these seemingly random acts, did you find yourself quietly saying, 'I wonder, was that coincidence or something more?' As a matter of fact, what motivated you to pick up this book? Was it chance? Or were you led to this moment to learn more about yourself and the mysterious guideposts, what I call God winks, that cause you to meet certain people, propel you in new directions, and place you into situations you never anticipated? You're about to confirm something you have suspected all along. The coincidence, God winks, are little messages to you on your journey through life, nudging you along the grand path that has been designed especially for you." Unquote. Some lines later, the author continues, "As you embark on this marvelous process of discovering the winks in your life, I ask you to keep your mind open to possibilities you have never imagined, and be prepared to take action steps toward goals and dreams that now seem distant." Unquote. As it said on the cover of the book, whether you call it synchronicity or coincidence, what brought you to this book today is worth remembering. In fact, you may have suspected all along that there is more to coincidence than meets the eye. These seemingly random events are actually signposts that can help you successfully navigate your career, relationships, and interests. Unquote. And the author even has stories about famous people, including Oprah Winfrey, and more about her wink a little later, with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Bobby Hebb and Sonny and Lionel Richie with Hello. And I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. The author, Squire Rushnell, writes, and again I quote, "Almost everyone harbors a slight, rarely articulated suspicion that there perhaps is something more to coincidence than meets the eye, something special and almost always spiritual. For this book, I have interviewed scores of people and researched hundreds of coincidence stories in hopes that a new perspective on such synchronistic events would help others to enrich their own lives. One frequent speculation was that coincidences rarely stand alone. Many people suggested that they happen in clusters or as a continuing series of unusual events. This was supported by author and futurist Peter Russell, who called them curious chains of coincidence, and by Arthur Kutzler, a noted theoretician on the principles of synchronicity, who used the phrase casual chains in a coincident event. Over the course of the book, I will be challenging you to take a sort of archaeological expedition into yourself. When you do, you'll be surprised to discover the emergence of an enchanting pattern or chain of coincidences marking your relationships and pursuits and your ups and downs. As you chart your winks, you'll see that they have increased in frequency at major turning points in your life. When you lost someone you love, or found someone to love. When you reached a crossroads in your career, such as a job loss or a promotion, or when something happened that sent your life into a whole new direction. Learning to identify the coincidental experiences of your life will help you to develop a confident sense of direction and an affirmation that no matter how often you may think it, you are never alone. Somewhere up above, there is a universal guidance system, and you are on that radar screen. Unquote. Some interesting thoughts on coincidence and God winks. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Steve Winwood, While You See a Chance. Nelly Furtado with Keith Urban, In God's Hands. And Chantal Kreviazuk with All I Can Do. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. The name of the book is When God Winks, How the Power of Coincidence Guides Your Life, by Squire Rushnell. Published a few years back by Atria Books, a trademark of Simon & Schuster. He writes, and again I quote, "First, you are under the influence of a cosmic guidance system, and every day you receive little nudges to keep you on your chosen path. Second, tracking the coincidences in your past will create an astonishingly lucid account of your life, while providing clarity to the grand possibilities on the road ahead. Third, you can learn to harness the power of coincidences to enrich your future, and to strengthen your inner convictions that the life path you've chosen is indeed the right path for you. And lastly, you'll see that coincidences happen for a reason. And that's to let you know one thing. You are not alone." Unquote. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Elvis in the Cold, Kentucky Rain, and Fergie, and Big Girls Don't Cry. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. In case you're wondering about the author, Squire Rushnell, a former cable television president and CEO, was for 20 years an executive with the ABC television network. There he led Good Morning America to #1 and fathered such programs for young people as Schoolhouse Rock and the ABC After School Specials, which together won 75 Emmys. Squire is a motivational, inspirational speaker and has been seen on many national programs, including Nightline, NBC Nightly News, Fox News Channel, and CBS This Morning. And again, from the cover of this wonderful little book, When God Winks, How the Power of Coincidence Guides Your Life, published a few years back by Atria Books, a trademark of Simon & Schuster, and I quote, "The author applies his compelling theory as to why coincidences exist to fascinating stories in history, sports, medicine, and relationships, involving both everyday and famous people, including Barbra Streisand, Charles Schulz, Oprah Winfrey, Kevin Costner, Mark Twain, and Presidents John Adams and Thomas Jefferson." Unquote. Oprah's story, coming up next with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Foreigner, Waiting for a Girl Like You. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. In the past, I've featured mention of some of the books in Oprah's book club. Well, she is even in this book, and I quote, "She had never wanted anything more in her life. If there was ever to be a movie based on Alice Walker's 1982 book, The Color Purple, the role of Sophia belonged to her. Ever since she had first read the book, and since the first dozen times she had reread the book, Oprah had felt like she was integral to it. And when she heard that Steven Spielberg was going to make the movie, she knew she had to be in it. Acting, however, was not high on her considerable list of skills. She had previously acted only in high school and college plays. As the host of a Chicago television show that had not yet gone national, how in the world could she become visible to Steven Spielberg and get an audition? God winked. Unbeknownst to Oprah, Quincy Jones, the famed producer and musician, had acquired the rights to The Color Purple. He was the one who had convinced Spielberg to become involved in the film. On a trip through Chicago, Quincy had caught Oprah's show on television and had come to the same conclusion. She was the perfect Sophia. He called the casting people and asked them to contact Oprah for an audition. Oprah was flabbergasted, but not too flabbergasted to jump at the opportunity. She auditioned, and then silence. The next 2 months were incredibly painful. No one called to tell her whether she had done well or badly. The casting agent had simply said, "Don't call us, we'll call you." She could not conceive of a single thing to do to move herself closer to her goal. Maybe it was her looks, she thought. Maybe she was overweight. Oprah took action. She enrolled in a workout retreat in hopes that she could quickly take off 30 pounds. She exhausted herself on the track, running and running, wondering what else could she do. On the track, she decided to let go. She had done all she could when an old spiritual came to mind. "I surrender all." She began singing it out loud right there on the track. God winked again. A staff member at the retreat came out to the running track to tell her there was a telephone call from Hollywood, Steven Spielberg's office. "Spielberg wanted to see me in Los Angeles the next day," said Oprah, "and I was told if you lose a pound, you could lose the part." The part was Sophia, an indomitable woman who was determined to marry a man named Harpo. "Harpo, that's Oprah spelled backwards," said Oprah, "and to me that was more than a coincidence. It was a sign the part was for me." Not only did Oprah get the role of Sophia, but the release of the movie was perfectly timed. It immediately preceded the national rollout of the Oprah Winfrey Show, which went on to become the most successful syndicated talk show in the history of television. And to close the loop of perfect synchronicity, when Oprah formed a production company to oversee her show and other projects, she gave it an apt name, Harpo Productions. Unquote. As the author of the huge bestseller When God Winks, How the Power of Coincidence Guides Your Life, said, and again I quote, when you wish for something, you also need to take action yourself, to place yourself in the direction that you wish to go, the direction that you believe to be in alignment with your destiny. Get on the path. Do everything you can do to be prepared for your Maker's reply to your wishes and prayers. Then, like Oprah, let go and wait for the God wink. Unquote. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. I hope you will tell all your friends about Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Good night. Sweet dreams. I'm Don Jackson.